I now welcome to the show Susan Knowles. Susan Knowles is a contributor to theblaze.com. As you know, The Blaze is run by Glenn Beck, whose show is heard here evenings on 610 WIOD. So kind of keeping it all in the family. Susan Knowles is also the host of Stand for Truth Radio, and you could check that out on her website at susanknowles.com. And she's also the author of a book, Freedom's Fight, A Call to Remember. Susan Knowles, welcome to News Radio 610 WIOD.
Hi, Lou. Thanks for having me on.
You have a lot going on. I could use up all of our time just introducing you. So you're being very generous with your time for being here today, and we do all appreciate it. For theblaze.com, yes, you work there with Glenn Beck and Pat and Stu, as I mentioned, who are heard here on 610 WIOD. You appear on Pat and Stu's show on occasion. You wrote a column, contributor there, which caught my eye about Obama should adopt Israel's strategy to fight terrorists who incite violence through social media. And this got me to thinking about, we're here in South Florida, and we have Cuba 90 miles to the south, and now diplomatic ties are opening up there. Obviously, a lot of Cuban immigrants are going to continue to come here now, probably more so now, and even the back and forth with tourism. You know, what's to stop a terrorist? Everybody's concerned about the Syrian refugees and people crossing the border in Mexico. I know you're in Southern California, so that's a concern where you live. But
right.
What's to stop a terrorist from the Middle East who flying to see Uncle Fidel and his brother Ramon, not to be confused with Joaquin and Julian Castro of the Democratic Party, although they might be kissing cousins. What's to stop a terrorist from going to Cuba and coming here? And how can we stop them? Can we stop them unless they're on social media? I mean, what does Israel do? That's what you write about in your column.
Yeah, I was going to say nothing really is there to stop them, and they don't even have to come to the United States. They really can just, if they want to reach somebody here, all they have to do is go through social media, and all kinds of propaganda from ISIS or anywhere else around the world comes into the United States. I mean, we're already told that there are thousands, literally thousands of messages being put out on social media right now for the purpose of making people want to fight alongside of ISIS.
That's an excellent point. Saeed Farouk was an American born in Indiana, moved to Southern California, where he was radicalized in some way, shape, or form, became a terrorist, and along with his rather not attractive wife, I know that makes me sexist, but she's ugly, probably more so on the inside, but the outside is no oil painting, trust me. They killed 14 people. And they had a presence on social media, okay? And for some reason, Jay Johnson and Homeland Security, they missed it. It makes you wonder, we're spending billions of dollars on, I don't know, the appearance of security, because for those 14 dead people and the others who were injured in San Bernardino, it certainly didn't provide security for them, because if they had checked social media, this wouldn't have happened. It could have been thwarted. I mean, do you think that there's some type of politically correct thing that's going on with Homeland Security, that they didn't check social media for people coming in from the Middle East? Because it would have been right there. It was right there. They just didn't look.
Well, absolutely. And, we've been told that Jay Johnson in the beginning didn't want to have anything to do with social media, that he wasn't checking it. He told his people not to check social media. And he's come out and said, it's absolutely false. I never said that. What I did say is that we consult with social media. Now, I'm not sure what that means, consulting with social media, but I don't know. Have you heard about the recent case in Pennsylvania?
Is that the one with Jalil Amir, I believe his name was, the teenager who was radicalized?
Right. How many times have you heard that on mainstream media? That happened?
Actually, I'd be 100% honest. I learned it from your column on theblaze.com. I did not hear it anywhere outside of you, Susan Knowles, to your credit.
Well, and I don't think you will. And this person, another person who was allegedly a United States citizen, don't know if he is or not, that's what the governor of Pennsylvania is saying. This particular individual is alleged to have used 57 different Twitter accounts in order to carry out what he was trying to do, which is, one, advocate for violence against United States citizens, and help bring people over to Syria to fight ISIS. and also to go after our military, to release information on our military and ask people to go and kill those people.
Now, you know what? I really do believe we should hire a 15-year-old girl to head the, I'm not kidding, vetting the part of social media, because young people today, teenagers especially, they're more well-versed in social media and the ways of that digital landscape, that digital map, than anybody. She'd probably do a lot better job than Jay Johnson, I'll tell you what, because all he is a not a diplomat. All he is a figurehead. But
right.
What do you think? Now, I got off on a tangent. I wanted to focus on the possibility of terrorists coming from Cuba to South Florida and then spreading their tentacles out across the nation. But before we get there, you got me thinking about this, the social media aspect of it. What is it? I mean, this is a rhetorical question, but feel free to give your opinion. What is it about our young people here that their brains are such silly putty that so many of them can be radicalized so easy when we don't exactly live in China, where there's a media blackout and the truth of what goes on in the world is being hidden from the public? I mean, everybody here has access to 24/7 media, young people online involved in social media even more so. And yet they still allow their silly putty brains to be manipulated. I mean, this could be a lot of reasons. Susan Knowles could be, not a good family foundation. It could be left alone. They could just be who knows what. What do you think it is?
Well, it's like you said, there are a lot of reasons. And I think one in particular could be, we have kids with a lot of time on their hands. And also we have a lot of games that they play that are really video games that aren't really age appropriate for them to play. And it's something that's exciting. You have all of this shooting and it looks so great and they're leaders and all of this. And of course, that's not what it's like when they go and join up in ISIS, but that's kind of what they believe is going to happen, that they're going to go there, they're going to fight for a purpose. And, we don't give our kids a lot these days in terms of a purpose. We don't expect a lot out of them sometimes. They show up to a game, we give them a trophy for being there. So I think kids are just sort of looking for something that they can hold on to, that they can find leadership in and a purpose in. And sometimes they go the wrong way and they go and join ISIS.
In the previous hour, we talked about Disneyland now installing metal detectors, and that was a spirited discussion. People came down on both sides of it. Not many in favor of the metal detectors. The gun enthusiasts want to be able to now, because of Paris, because of San Bernardino, bring their guns into places like Disneyland where they wouldn't have before because of the threat of terrorism. Also touched on the aspect that guns are going to be the number one gift this Christmas. So terrorism is having an effect. And, I can't help but think about Cuba, because things have been so softened between, as far as going restrictions eased, eliminated actually, going back and forth between the two nations, that everybody's focusing on, the borders in Arizona and Texas and California and, other places, and the Syrian refugees being brought in. But if I'm a terrorist, I go to Cuba and I just take a short flight to Miami and I'm here, no?
Well, absolutely. And here in California, we worry about Mexico, but what about coming across from Canada? We have all the borders that we really need to worry about. We can't just say, they're coming this way. They're as smart as we are. They know that if we think they're coming, let's say, across the border from Mexico, that's where we're going to be looking for them, possibly. And so every other border then is open, fair game for them to come through. And it is a possibility that they could come right through Cuba, since we're going to open up relations with them. Why not?
In your column on theblaze.com, you do cite Israel's strategy of fighting terrorists, obviously a much smaller country, but with a much larger terrorist population. And I cite many of our friends of the Jewish faith who live here in South Florida and, potentially soft targets. You've got New York, and you've got a lot of transplanted New Yorkers from the tri-state area come down here, especially this time of year, Susan Knowles, snowbird season. And, if the number one enemy in their mind, that is, of jihadists are people of the Jewish faith. Number two are Americans. You have people of the Jewish faith coming together en masse on American soil, hence South Florida. And to me, that would be an appealing target. I don't hesitate saying that because this isn't something that the Jewish community is not well aware of. And I'm sure the terrorists have thought of it themselves. And now lessening restrictions, opening borders between the United States and Cuba, I think is a bad idea, first of all, because Cuba didn't do anything to earn it. They have all of their human rights violations, which is a show for another day. But now you're giving the terrorists another avenue to enter into the United States, and their first port of entry is our backyard, the backyard here, Susan Knowles, not your backyard in Southern California, the backyard of 610 WIOD, South Florida.
Well, absolutely. And you say, Jews are a target, but I think we also have to remember that Christians are a huge target to Islam, especially in the Middle East. And we saw in San Bernardino, they called it a holiday party, but as we all know, it was a Christmas party that's going on. So it's not likely that they would come here to target both Jews and Christians. Anybody who's not of the Islamic faith is an infidel and can be targeted. And I think it is a real possibility. And if we don't look at it, if our administration says, oh, that's another JV team that would be coming from Cuba, let's not worry about it, I think Americans need to be worried about it.
I think the terrorists of ISIS are really it's a place where a bunch of brainwashed psychopaths can congregate together and then just kill, whether he be Jew or Gentile. They don't care. They'll just kill. You don't quote the Quran the right way, they're going to kill you, even if you are a Muslim. Oh, you should have studied harder. Rat-tat-tat. We'll take a quick break. If anybody would like to get in on the conversation, I know most hosts don't take calls when they have guests, but if you'd like to ask Susan Knowles a question, yeah, we're open to anything. 866-610-6397. We'd like to flow loose and easy here. Lou Pate here with you. When we come back, we'll continue to discuss the issue of terrorism in the United States, how Israel handles it, and their success rate, because they're focused on it 24/7. You're listening to News Radio 610 WIOD. Welcome back to News Radio 610 WIOD. Lou Pate here with you until noon, ably assisted by Mike Lacomiak. Here we're going to take your phone calls. I know most hosts, when you have a guest, they don't take phone calls, but I just like to give out options. 866-610-6397. Our special guest, Susan Knowles from theblaze.com. She's a contributor to theblaze.com, also the host for Stand for Truth Radio, and you can listen to that on susanknowles.com. Susan, we're talking about a lot of different things here, and on your column on theblaze.com, you cite the Israelis, and you actually entitle it about. Here, let me get this straight. I want to do it justice. I want to get it right. Obama should adopt Israel's strategy to fight terrorists who incite violence through social media. And you talked with, I don't want to mess up their names. I want to be proper. Nimrod Kozlovsky. Did I get that right? We spoke with the good doctor who said, first of all, let it be clear. We are a superpower in our technological intelligence capabilities, end quote. That you would think that is talking about the United States. Whenever you hear the term superpower, people think the United States. But he's actually talking about Israel.
He's actually talking about Israel. And I do believe that Israel probably has one of the best technological ways to get information, maybe that we have perhaps, but we don't use, not necessarily. And
well,
I know
they have a three-pronged system, and I'm not going to get into it. It's too detailed, but people can check out your column there. But the monitoring, interfering, and the destruction of Internet activity is the way they do things.
Right. And they say the key to stopping the terrorist attacks is through just stopping the incitement altogether. So if you're allowing this to continue on social media, when you're going out there and spreading propaganda and calling for jihad or anything else that you may be doing, then right there, you have to stop that in order to stop everything that comes after that goes through social media and comes here and could harm us by getting people together and asking them to go out and fight and kill Americans.
When you said incite, I thought you were referring to poor Saeed Farouk. I thought they incited him by mocking his beard.
I'm sure that's it, but since everybody in ISIS has a beard, it was somebody else, I'm sure, who bullied him.
It's mandatory. If you don't have a beard, they'll cut your head off. Hey, Susan Knowles, you're down to take some phone calls. You must be appealing to the 610 WIOD listeners. Let's go to Alan in Miami. You're on 610 WIOD with Lou Pate and Susan Knowles. Welcome.
Hello, sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for holding. How can we help you?
Okay, I'd just like to talk really quick about the terrorist threat, and I'm very concerned the way that our country is going, specifically when it comes to the war on terror. And how, and a lot of people are beating up on Donald Trump for, his comments on Muslims, which may be wrong, may be right, but when in fact it is our own president who has bombed 7 Muslim countries since his inauguration. And the thing is that the terrorist threat is being overplayed. You got a better chance of being struck by lightning in the United States than being killed in a terrorist attack. There's a lot of soft targets like Disney World you were talking about. Anybody can just walk up into Disney World, drive in there, and kill a bunch of people, but it hasn't happened. Because the threat
Alan, hold on. First of all, the president does not allow the use of the term war on terror. That is no longer allowed. I allow it on this show. You can say it. We don't violate free speech here, but the president refuses to acknowledge Muslim terrorism. Right. He refuses to acknowledge jihad. But the point you make, and Susan, feel free to jump in, that is a straw man's argument that you have the more chance of being killed by lightning than you do a terrorist attack. More people die of heart disease. There's a million things that kill more people than terrorism, but that does not take away the danger of terrorism.
Right. I mean, I agree, but it's much more in Israel, let's say, for example, than the United States. So the reason that what I'm trying to say is the more we hype this up and the more we say terror, we're, scare everybody into terrorism. I mean, it's not really a threat as compared to other things in the United States. You know what I mean? So if we're going to arm ourselves,
I know what you mean. And again, I know what you mean. And it's a straw man's article because, like a straw man's it's a talking point that you're using. Terrorism is a concern and it is a danger. So basically, you're siding with our president when he says that the media is making too much of the terrorist threat.
I'm not siding with president because the president is lying by saying what he's doing is saying, oh, there's no war on terror while simultaneously bombing 7 Muslim countries. There is a war on terror, and the government is perpetuating it. And it doesn't matter if Democrat or Republican, they're going to keep doing it because of the military-industrial complex. They want to just keep going to war, and we need an excuse to go to war.
Yeah, but hold on, 1 second. 1 second out. But you're basically saying that we in the media are making too much of the threat.
You are. I believe
that's what the president said in his radio interview just the other day. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, but he's saying that he's lying. He's saying, "Oh yeah, okay, no, there's no." No. That's not discriminating against.
All right, Alan, we got to run. The music says we got to go, but you're contradicting yourself. No, the president. That's not a lie. That's his opinion on the media presentation of the issue. We'll talk about Susan. Can you hold on? We didn't hear from you there.
Sure.
All right, because we didn't get you. Thanks for your time. We'll come right back here on 610 News Radio 610 WIOD. Welcome back to News Radio 610 WIOD. Lou Pate here with you on an extended interview with our guest, Susan Knowles. She's a former practicing attorney in the state of California, the host of Stand for Truth Radio, which you can check out at susanknowles.com, and also a contributor to Glenn Beck's The Blaze. As you know, Glenn's show can be heard here in the evenings on 610 WIOD. Susan Knowles, thank you for staying through the break. I asked you to come on for 2 segments. I feel like I am a man of my word because I did not hear from you while we were talking to Alan in the last segment. So technically, this would be your second segment. Can we agree on that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks for being a good sport. All kidding aside, we are talking about the issue of terrorism, which you do discuss in your latest column on theblaze.com. And it talks about, adopting Israel's strategy to fight terrorists. We've talked about a lot of different things that Israel does to keep their people safe and how they are a superpower of technology. But they're like us. They are not without their problems. And they have, hatchet attacks, knife attacks, which are becoming popular there because no one's allowed to have guns. And I think terrorist-wise, that is the biggest problem facing the entire world, because no longer is it a Khobar Towers. No longer is it something that needs to be well organized like the attack on the USS Cole or 9/11 or Mumbai and Bali and all of these different attacks that have happened. It's a shame that there's so many. Now you just have to worry about the lone nut with a kitchen knife in Israel, and here where we can get our hands on guns, which I think is a good thing. The fact that terrorists can come into this nation, have their friends buy them guns like they do, like the woman did, the wife in San Bernardino, and then kill people.
Well, yeah, and I would really like to follow up on what Alan was saying, the last callers, because I think this would concern people in Cuba and everywhere else, and I think it should be a great concern. Now, while Alan was talking about, well, ISIS here and us being hurt in the United States, it isn't the biggest deal. I mean, we have other things. You're more likely to be killed over here, blah, blah, blah. What are you saying? But the point I want to make is, right now, it's a growing threat. ISIS is a growing threat in the United States. And as long as we continue to ignore it and not look at social media or talk about, what could happen with people coming into Cuba or coming into Mexico or anyplace else, and as long as we have a president who looks at it as they're a JV team, it is going to grow. The threat is going to grow. And we also know it's already happened here in the United States. San Bernardino is one example. Chattanooga, Fort Hood, Garland, Texas, with Pamela Geller when they came after her, and even sort of in the beginning of all this, when a coworker beheaded a woman in Oklahoma. So we need to concern ourselves about ISIS here in the United States because we are under attack here in the United States.
As troubling as all of those attacks are, and I'm ashamed to admit, Susan Knowles, and to the listeners of 610 WIOD, I remember when many of those happened, and most of them have slipped from my memory, except for Fort Hood, because what's almost equally as heinous as the terrorist attacks is the egregious behavior on the part of the media and their attempt to kind of sweep it under the rug and pretend like it didn't happen, because I truly believe that President Obama on his watch wanted to have a clean list and say terrorism didn't happen on my watch. Obviously, that's been blown out the window, but that was his attempt. That's why Fort Hood was called a workplace violence or some nuttiness like that. But I want to throw it out to the people out there. Susan Knowles is our special guest. If you want to get in on the conversation, as Alan did, you can feel free to ask her a question at 866-610-6397. Now, Susan Knowles, back to the issue of social media. You mentioned before, I had you on concerned about terrorists sneaking in from Cuba, but you don't have to worry about that because they're already in the heads of our young people. And now you have the possibility of people like Jalil Amir in Pennsylvania, who was arrested by authorities, who can he had a stockpile of weapons, who can then commit their own acts of terror. And as with the knife attacks in Israel, I hate to say this because you kind of come full circle and you realize there's no way to defend against terrorism, is there?
Well, there's certainly not a way to defend against it if we're not going to do the things that we are capable of doing and can do. One of those is, again, totally monitoring social media, not making excuses of why we can or can't do that. Telling the public what is going on. I mean, how do you know down in South Florida right now that there's not things going on that you haven't been told of, or that the media is downplaying what is happening? I know in San Bernardino, we were told that the president asked the police department, the FBI, to downplay what was going on in San Bernardino. How do you know that that's not happening around the rest of the country? And like you said, you hadn't even heard, as I hadn't before I did my article, I had not even heard about what happened in Pennsylvania. How many people do we have? We know there are like hundreds and thousands of supporters of ISIS. How do we know they're not sitting right there in Florida, but nobody's telling you about them?
You know what I find fascinating for anybody listening, and you want to get on the conversation, you can dial us up to comment on this. We see the girls, the young teenage girls, two of them from Australia. We see the three affluent girls from, I forget where it was in England, but they were from England. And, on social media, you were able to monitor their trek from running away to making it to, into Turkey, into Syria by way of Turkey. Last pictures of them, the three of them standing at a bus stop with their bags, and their bags were stuffed the way anybody would, stuff a bag when you're traveling abroad like that, not realizing the hell that faces them. And, those girls disappeared. Obviously, they didn't get to use their phones and their pads and all their clothes and shoes and whatever else were in those bags. The two girls, though I'm citing the ones from England, the two girls from Australia realized the horror of what they had done by going to ISIS. After posing in burqas and smiling, they basically became sex slaves and were abused. One tried to get away, and they beat her to death. They beat her to death in front of the other girls. They're never coming home. These stories are out there, Susan Knowles, and our teenagers hear them, and yet they still, I say, allow themselves to get radicalized, but they still then become radicalized. I don't even know if the best shrink in the country could give me an answer as to how and why that happens.
Well, probably not, because, again, there's so many reasons why these kids do what they do. But I think that just shows us that, number one, we need more education on the subject matter. I think the kids need to be, sat down and taught about the dangers of ISIS and not what they're hearing from the ISIS propaganda and how wonderful it is to go out and fight and here's the wonderful purpose that you're fighting for, that type of propaganda. They need to be told the truth. And again, if we're not going to talk about it here in the United States, how are they going to ever hear the truth? If not from their parents, if they don't get it at school. And I do think, it's a parent's obligation to sit down and talk to them about the dangers of what's going on. I also think it's a parent's obligation to watch and monitor what they're doing on social media. I know it's difficult, but I think we have to step up our game. We're in a whole new situation that we've never been in before, and it is a deadly one. And parents need to inform their kids about what's going on.
All right, one last question, and I want to make a comment on something you wrote. In the last hour, I want to get your feel on this because it's all part and parcel, this terrorist thing. I talked about Disneyland and other parks such as Universal Studios Hollywood installing metal detectors. Right. I feel Disney is using the terrorism angle and what happened in San Bernardino and Paris to promote their anti-gun agenda. Do you think, I think Disneyland, Disney World, the Disney Resort Park company actually opens them, has put a beacon on themselves as now we obviously Disneyland, Disney World would be a soft target before, but they have now put a beacon on themselves as being a super soft target by saying, all right, we have an anti-gun policy before, but now we're installing metal detectors. We're not selling toy guns. You can't even wear a mask if you're 15 years old or above. Do you think they're going to rue the day on this, or the anti-gun agenda that they have is going to backfire on them? No pun intended.
Well, I think it's what people feel in California in the gun-free zones. You might as well just put up, a target around the words gun-free zone, because when there are no guns there, and if you're a supporter of ISIS, what better target than to go in there and do harm to people? And I know that there are security guards there, but as we know, there are not enough people to protect everyone in Disneyland at all times. So it does make it scarier for people who want to go to Disney World or Disneyland. You're going to have to be even more vigilant than you've been before. But when you put up a sign saying gun-free zone, I think it makes you potentially more of a target.
And what they don't understand is that terrorists are not going to go through the turnstile and through the metal detector. They're not going to come in that way. They're in a place like Disney. They would basically storm it like an invasion, jump over it, and just start shooting. Yeah. And it might not happen to Disney. I hope it doesn't happen to Disney or any other park. Right. But there are going to be soft target terrorist actions here, terrorist attacks, terrorist murders here, and which brings me to the last line in your Blaze.com piece about adopting Israel's strategy. You say, and I quote, "No country can afford to follow a lackluster policy when it comes to fighting terrorism and protecting its citizens against harm, both at home and abroad." End quote. A lot of people feel in this country that our government is very lackluster. The president, he's easy to pick on, and I try not to do it, but he seems detached when it comes to the issue of terrorism. Kind of like Alan, the caller just before the bottom of the hour, kind of distributing the left-wing talking points that, more people are killed by lightning. Well, more people are killed by eating bacon, too. You know what I mean? It's one of these things: strokes, heart disease, car accidents. Terrorism is down on the list, but it's number one in people's brains. You think the president is going to sharpen the knives on this and hear some tough talk? Donald Trump is giving tough talk. A lot of people like it. Love him or hate him, he's popular. The president, even if you like him, people who love him say he's coming off as weak on this.
Well, I think he's just trying to downplay everything. And it also could be a little bit of living in denial. I mean, it's so much easier to live in denial than to have to deal with a problem that is continuing to grow and is going to be a huge problem unless we do something about it. And even Israel, I'm sorry to say, they kind of put this type of thing at the bottom of their priority list. So going and looking for people on social media has not been a high priority for them, even though they have the means and the ways to do it. They've sort of been lackluster in their policies in doing that. And I don't think we can afford to do that here. I don't think we have a clear policy. And I know the House Democrats and Republicans have been working together to come up with a strategy to make the president come up with his own strategy on how he's going to deal with ISIS as they use social media to get more and more people to come and fight alongside of them.
All right, one quick question. I said one more, but I do have one more. Do you think the president was wrong to open up diplomatic ties with Cuba again?
I think it's very bad timing, and I would question the motives for doing so.
And when they did this earlier in the year, and they had the big fanfare of putting the Cuban flag back on our State Department roof, he was calling ISIS the JV team, and really did not have any vision down the road. Hence the bad timing you cite. Susan Knowles, thank you very much. The host for Stand for Truth Radio, a contributor to theblaze.com. Thank you for your extended time here, even though you didn't speak in the second segment. But we do appreciate your time here. And you can all the folks who listen to News Radio 610 WIOD, you can check Susan out at susanknowles.com. Susan Knowles, dare I say, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Lou. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, and appreciate your time. We'll take a quick break. Lou Pate here with you. News Radio 610 WIOD.